Hey friends, tonight we begin with whispers. Not the kind passed between lovers, but the kind exchanged in candlelit corners, between ink-stained fingers and eyes that have seen too much. This is a story of books, but not the kind resting safely on library shelves. These were the books you could be burned for touching. The ones you copied in silence and buried in jars beneath the chapel floor. They called it heresy, but it was really hunger. For truth, for meaning, for the right to read what someone didn't want you to. So tonight, we'll trace the journey of forbidden words, from the hands that wrote them, to the fires that tried to erase them, and the gardens that remembered them anyway. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe if you enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It always amazes me to know who's joining us. Across oceans, time zones, and quiet little rooms like this one. Now, dim the lights. Let the hum of the night wrap around you. And breathe in deep as we step into the sacred shadows of history. They say the world is made of sound, but here, in the scriptorium, it is made of silence and the steady scratch of quills across stretched parchment. You don't speak when you enter. No one does. You bow your head because they all do, because the air demands it, because the ink here is older than your name. The room is long, stone, and cold even in summer. The walls are thick, the windows thin. Everything echoes, but gently. Even footsteps are softened by the old wood beneath them, worn down by centuries of monks pacing between candle and desk, between vellum and inkpot, between heaven and heresy. The desks are lined in perfect rows, each one lit by a single narrow window or a waxy, low-burning lamp. The light is enough to read by, but only just. Perhaps that's the point. You are not here to read. You are here to copy, letter by letter, line by line. Mistakes are not allowed. Mistakes are sin. You watch the monk nearest to you. His hands are steady, fingers stained with iron gall ink. Each curve of the letter G takes 3 strokes. Each margin is measured with string. He does not blink often. A bell tolls faintly outside. Mid-morning. Still hours before the meal. Still hours before any word will be spoken aloud. A page turns. Not yours. The monk across from you, his name is Brother Anselm, moves just slightly. His shoulders hitch. Not enough to call attention, but enough. You look down again. Today you are copying the Psalms. You've done this before, many times, but today your eyes wander to the edge of your template page, to the margins, to the faint lines in red ink that weren't there yesterday. Tiny notes written sideways. Not Latin. You don't recognize the script, but you know it shouldn't be there. Anselm coughs. A dry, swallowed thing. Heads remain down, but you know they heard it. Everyone heard it. It's the kind of cough you don't acknowledge. The kind that becomes dangerous only when noticed. You dip your quill. The ink is thicker than usual. Someone used too much gum arabic. It dries fast. You don't mind. It forces you to write slowly. And slowness, here, is safe. The abbot once said the devil is in the rush. He rides the hand that tries to finish before Vespers, he said, half smiling. You believed him then. You believe him more now. Across the room, the novice drops a knife. Not a weapon, just the tool used to scrape parchment. But the sound it makes is loud, louder than it should be, like a word shouted in a graveyard. No one moves, except Anselm. He closes the book he's been working from, far too gently, as if afraid the pages will remember the air. He stands. He bows to the crucifix, and he walks out without a word. His lamp is still lit, his seat still warm, but he does not return by supper, nor by dawn. No one mentions him, not the abbot, not the others. You hear someone murmur a prayer in the cloisters the next evening, but no name is used. Just a plea to guard the hands that carry too much. You return to your desk. You do not speak. You do not ask. But your eyes keep flicking back to the margin of your page, to that one strange curve of red ink, to that letter that might be a J or a serpent, to that word that might mean light or burn. Later, you ask the librarian, quietly, and without names, if there are older glosses in other tongue. She shakes her head, but her eyes say she knows what you're asking, and her silence tells you more than her answer. That night, you return after Compline. Technically, you're not allowed in the scriptorium after dark, but the door creaks less than you thought it would. The candles are still burning, dim, low, like they knew you'd be back. You sit. The book is still there, the same page. The red ink still fresh. You trace the margin with your fingertip, not enough to smudge it. You listen, not for footsteps, not for reprimands, but for the silence. For the way it changes when truth is near. It's heavier now, like breath held in a crowded room, like something waiting for you to read it aloud. But you don't. Not yet. You pick up your quill. You copy the next verse of the Psalms. Carefully, obediently. Your hand does not tremble, but your heart does. You return to your desk before the sun has fully risen. The lamps are still burning, faintly. No one has trimmed their wicks yet. You like it that way. There is something about the hour before the world fully wakes, when ink glows amber and the silence still belongs to God. The page you left yesterday is still waiting. The same psalm, the same strange line in the margin, not erased, not smeared, not explained. You trace it again, not with your fingers this time, but with your eyes. You've been taught never to linger on annotations. Your task is not to question what was added in red or what was written sideways. Your task is to copy only what is approved, word for word, line for line, from the authorized codex. But this one is different. It's not a typical gloss, not the kind the masters add to clarify Latin phrases. And it's not in Latin at all. It curves, almost like Greek, but not quite. The letters breathe in a way Roman script does not. They lean into each other like secrets. You once heard that in the East, script was a form of art, that a single word written in a certain way could become a prayer or a crime. You wonder if that's what this is. a prayer too dangerous to speak aloud, or a truth that became a sin. A footstep behind you. You don't turn. You know who it is by the rhythm, soft, deliberate, never hurried. It's Brother Patern. He oversees the finished pages. He is not cruel, but he is exact. He stops at your desk, breathes, doesn't speak, then leans slightly to look at your sheet. You feel him see it. That mark in the margin, that blood-red curve, that letter that does not belong. He does not reprimand you. He does not bless you. He simply tears the page from your stack, slowly, gently, as though removing something already dead, and then he leaves. Your quill hovers over the next blank parchment. For a long time, you do not move. The page stares back at you, white and vast, an emptiness too loud to ignore. In school, you were taught about marginalia. The monks called them flowers, decorations, clarifications, little vines of thought blooming beside the word. But not all flowers were innocent. Some carried thorns. In one of the older tomes, hidden deep in the library's locked case, there's a gospel where Christ laughs. Not a metaphor, not a gloss. A single line, scrawled in the corner of an illumination. Jesus laughed before they struck him. The ink is faded. The hand that wrote it was left-handed. Unusual. And beside that phrase, someone else added, in sharper ink, "Erase this." But it wasn't erased, because the margins were where faith bled, where questions hid like foxes in the brush. You begin to understand why they fear the red. Later that day, you ask Brother Aldrich about the ink. Not the word, just the ink. He's the scriptorium supplier. He measures out iron gall and vermilion powder by hand. He knows every bottle, every quill, every wax seal. You ask if the red is from the usual batch. He hesitates, then says, "Number." Just that. No explanation. And he doesn't meet your eyes. The next morning, the desk where Anselm once sat is cleaned. The candle is replaced. The seat left open, as if nothing happened. But someone has added a small note to the list on the wall. Brother Matthias transferred to Dijon. You know that name, but not that face. That night, you hear whispers near the dormitory. Two novices speaking in hushed tones. One says, "The devil has a new name." Translation. The other laughs, softly, and says the devil always had a name. It's just that now, people can read it. You press your back to the stone wall and listen. They speak of a woman, a heretic, who was caught reading scripture aloud to children in a village across the river. She claimed she was only teaching them Latin, but the bishop said the rhythm was wrong, said it wasn't Latin, said it was the devil's tongue, a dialect they call Provençal. She was taken. Not killed. Not yet. Just taken. No one knows where. But someone said she spoke of a book that moves, and a man who carries it wrapped in cloth. The next day, the abbot gives a sermon. His voice is slow and honeyed, the way it always is when he's afraid. He doesn't mention Anselm. He doesn't mention the red ink, but he does mention obedience. He says, the devil is not in books, but in those who think they can understand them alone. He says God speaks through the church, and the church speaks through Latin. All other tongues are echoes, and some echoes lead to cliffs. you are dismissed without a blessing, which means more than a reprimand. No one meets your gaze. Even the sunlight filtering through the lancet windows feels dull. The dust in the air moves like ash. That evening, you return to your desk. Your ink is replaced. Fresh parchment is laid. But on the edge of your chair, a folded scrap of vellum. No name, no seal. Just a mark. 3 short lines drawn in red, like a trinity turned sideways. You unfold it. The words are written in French. Plain, slanted, fast. Not the delicate hand of the trained monks. More like someone writing in haste. Someone not supposed to be writing at all. It says, "The margins remember what the chapters forget." The book is not in the case. The lock is in the candle. You read it twice. Then again, the candle on your desk flickers. Its wax has pooled wide and low, like a mouth, open and glowing. You wonder if there's something inside. But you do not reach for it. Not yet. Because someone is watching. You can feel it. Like parchment feels ink before the first stroke. There is a cupboard in the back of the library. No one talks about it. Not even the old ones who no longer write, only shelve. It has no lock, no key, only a habit of staying closed. The wood is darker than the rest, almost black, though it hasn't been burned. Its hinges are oiled, but the door creaks anyway, as if it wants you to know when it opens, as if the cupboard believes in warnings. You first noticed it when shelving a genealogy record last winter. A gust of wind had come through the rose window. Impossible, since the window does not open. But the candle beside you flickered sideways, and the cupboard door had moved. Only a little, but enough. Inside, there are no shelves, only a stack of cloth-wrapped volumes, uneven and unmarked. One is bound with red cord, another with wire. None have titles, but one is wrapped not in cloth, but in a page. And not just any page. You recognize the handwriting. It was Anselm's. You didn't open it. Not then, because Brother Patern was nearby, and because you remembered something the abbot once said during a sermon on holy restraint. The devil doesn't tempt with wine or women. Not first. He tempts with meaning, with pages that ask you to understand them alone. The next day, you return. The library is quiet, even more so than usual. There's no fire lit, just cold stone and dust. You bring no candle, only a flint. You don't need to see the whole room, just the inside of the cupboard. It opens easier this time, as if it knew you would come, as if it had been waiting. You unwrap the book slowly. The page that binds it crumbles at the corners. Anselm's hand is still visible. He used walnut ink. Cheaper than gall. Fades faster, but still here. Inside, no title page. No illuminations. Only lines of script, cramped, hurried, inconsistent. It looks nothing like the sanctioned texts. This wasn't written in a scriptorium. It was written somewhere dark, somewhere secret, somewhere scared. You read the first line. It begins like Genesis, but not quite. It says, "In the beginning, the words were scattered, and men were not meant to gather them. Then, The first punishment was not death, but silence. Then, those who gather the words must not be seen. Your hands begin to sweat. You turn the page. The second folio is different. It contains symbols, star shapes, curling lines, almost mathematical. But beside them, small notes in various languages. Some you know, Greek, Latin. Some you do not, perhaps Syriac, perhaps something older. One line is written in plain French. This is the book they tried to unwrite. You hear something behind you. Not a voice, a breath. But it's not close. It's in the stone itself. A sound like dust remembering. You close the book. You wrap it again. You place it back. Not where you found it, but deeper. Behind the others, where even the cupboard might forget it. That night, you cannot sleep. The flintstone is still in your pocket. You turn it over and over in the dark, each side smooth from years of use. You wonder how many hands have held it before yours. How many lit flames, not for warmth, but for answers. You begin to dream, but it doesn't feel like your dream. It feels borrowed. The parchment moves on its own. The ink bleeds upward, back into the quill. And the quill? It's held by no one, just suspended in air, like a sentence waiting to be spoken. You wake up with your hands clenched. Your nails have left half-moon impressions in your palm. Your mouth is dry. The candle at your bedside has burned out, but the room is still glowing, faintly, from nothing you can name. In the scriptorium, a new rule is posted. No unsanctioned glosses, no deviations, no entry after compline. Violations will be reported. You don't ask who made the rule, but you notice that it's written in Brother Patern's hand and nailed in place with iron. The novices begin to whisper again. They say another monk has vanished. This time, not from the scriptorium, but from the infirmary. He was fevered, they said, and before he left, he kept repeating a phrase in Greek. He spoke through fire. They say he lit a candle in the chapel and it screamed. They say he saw letters burning behind the altar cloth. They say, too much, and now no one can find him. You are called to the abbot's chambers, not for punishment, not directly. He asks you to read aloud from the book of John, chapter 1. You know this trick. It's not about theology. It's about pronunciation, about rhythm, about whether your tongue bends too easily toward the vernacular, toward heresy. You read carefully, softly, eyes lowered. The abbot smiles, but not with kindness. He says nothing. He dismisses you. As you leave, you notice something odd. The candle on his desk burns blue at the edge. That night, you go back to the library. You tell yourself it's to return a scroll, but you bring nothing. You go to the cupboard. You open it. The book is gone. All of them are. Only a single strip of parchment remains. And on it, not a warning, not a threat, just a sentence. He who reads in silence shall be written in silence. You don't understand it. Not yet, but you know you are already inside its margins. They warned you long before you could even read. Not with punishment, that would come later, but with silence, with a glance held too long when you asked what a certain word meant, with a smile that didn't reach the eyes when you said you wanted to read like the priests did, with a hand, gently but firmly, closing the page. You don't remember the first word you weren't supposed to know, only that once you knew it, you started noticing the rest. The shape of forbidden knowledge is like a bruise in parchment, not part of the skin, but staining everything under it. The truth is this: you were never meant to understand. Not fully, not without permission, not without supervision. They said the Bible was dangerous in the wrong hands, and your hands, they decided, were wrong. It began subtly. First, a decree. Only priests could read aloud in public. Then, only sanctioned texts could be copied. Then, only Latin was safe, the language of Christ, they claimed, although Christ never spoke it. Latin was never about God. It was about control, about how the truth, when wrapped in an unfamiliar tongue, became easier to hold and harder to question. And so they draped every holy word in Latin, like putting a crown on silence. In the town below the abbey, a woman once asked for a book, not to copy, only to see. A mother. She wanted to teach her son how to spell his own name. They say she offered coin. They say she even offered a prayer. But the priest told her names are dangerous. He said God would understand her son, even if she could not. She asked again the next week. The week after, her home was inspected. Not by soldiers, by friars. They claimed she was hiding translated gospels. They claimed she owned parchment not purchased through the parish. They claimed the boy had spoken aloud the name of Eve and used her name in a rhyme. The family vanished 2 nights later. No public charge. No fire. Just gone. Only the priest remained, and his version of the story. The boy's name was never spoken again. You start to notice how often the forbidden begins in the ordinary. A scribbled note, a book left too long in candlelight, a question asked too many times. The church did not fear fire. It feared translation. It feared comprehension. There is power in repetition. They knew that. So they recited the same chants, same verses, same truths, until your ears accepted them as natural, until any variation felt like heresy, until reading became not a task of the eye, but of obedience. There was once a monk named Henri. He was quiet. He preferred animals to people. He tended the hounds. He wrote only when instructed. Then one day he asked if he could transcribe a prayer into French, just for the stables. He said the animals wouldn't know Latin anyway. He said he only wanted to speak to God in a voice he would recognize, his own. Henri was sent away. They said it was to a priory in the hills, but no other priory ever claimed him, and the hounds cried for 3 nights, then stopped. The fear wasn't of misreading. It was of understanding too well, because once you understood what the words actually said, you might ask what they didn't. And that was the beginning of doubt. And doubt, they believed, was the first crack in heaven's gate. The church began to keep records, not just of births and deaths, but of books. Every village with a chapel had a ledger. Inside it, what texts were allowed, what pages had gone missing, and what names were associated with unapproved reading. Some say this was for order, others knew better. It was a list of ghosts in the making. You once saw one of these ledgers, tucked between funeral accounts and grain offerings. A name had been scratched out, but the page beneath was warped, as if someone had pressed too hard while writing it, or while erasing it. Sometimes erasure is louder than ink. In the monastery now, you are told not to copy anything except what you're given. You are told that even the Psalms must not be interpreted. You are told that "thou shalt not kill" does not apply to souls lost to confusion. And confusion, they say, begins with reading alone. There is a word they use now, glossa. It means a note beside the scripture, a commentary, a way of saying, this is what the text really means. But even the glossa are now controlled. They must be approved, reviewed, stamped. Holy understanding, certified by wax. Anything else is a whisper too loud. You begin to wonder, how many books disappeared without being burned? How many truths were unbound, copied, and hidden under floorboards? How many voices still linger between the walls of this place? Not as spirits, but as ink, waiting for someone who dares to read without fear. You know now that the danger isn't the book. It's the moment you realize you don't need someone else to tell you what it says. That moment, that flicker of independent comprehension, that is what they are trying to erase. There is a girl in the village who hums hymns in the market. She is young. She cannot read, but her melodies follow the shape of forbidden psalms. On market days, people stop to listen. They pretend to inspect apples or cheese, but they listen. Last Sunday, a priest walked by. He didn't speak, but he dropped a black ribbon at her feet. She hasn't been seen since. One evening, you are asked to copy a new page. It's unfamiliar, not scripture. A decree issued from Avignon, signed with the papal seal. It says all books must now be marked by category: safe, restricted, or destroyed. You are to copy only the safe list. But someone has scribbled something at the bottom of your page in fading ink. Even saints were once forbidden. You hesitate, then copy the line anyway, exactly as it is. In Latin, but you know what it means. And now, so will whoever reads it next. They say light is a gift, but in some rooms, light is a risk. It shows too much. It makes what you're doing real, so they read in the dark. Not pitch black, just enough light to see the edge of the page. A single candle placed in a corner reflected off a tin bowl to stretch the glow. It's not the kind of reading one does for pleasure. It's the kind done with one ear on the door. The kind of reading that could end a life, or save one, sometimes both. There is a cellar beneath the chapel, not part of the official plans. It was built by a mason who died before he could be questioned. Now it holds wine barrels, salted fish, and something else. A desk, a chair, and a hidden press. Not a Gutenberg, not the big iron arms and clanging levers of the cities. This one is small, silent, made of repurposed wood and prayer. It can press 6 pages a night, 8 if you skip spacing. No illuminations, no borders, only words, plain. That's the heresy now. Plainness, unadorned truth, words stripped of gold, leaf, and Latin cages, words anyone can read. They call themselves lanterns. They do not sign their names. They do not meet in daylight. They speak in slips of parchment tucked inside psalters. They write in French, German, Czech, the tongues of the hearth, not the altar. Some of them are monks. Some are mothers. One is a butcher's apprentice who learned to read from the shipping ledger. They copy pages late at night, in script rough from ink made of soot and vinegar. The pages smell like fire, but they carry light. One book, passed hand to hand across a whole valley, speaks of Christ as a shepherd who knows every voice. Every voice. Not just the ones that chant in Latin, not just the ones in vestments, even the broken ones, even yours. That book is burned when it's caught, but someone copies it again and again. They say there are 5 copies now. No, 6. No, maybe more, because no one knows how many hands believe in what it says. You're asked to deliver parchment to the storage cellar. You go. You take your time. You open the lower door gently. There's a woman there. Not a nun. Not anyone you know. She's scraping ink off a page with a knife, then rewriting the page from memory. You say nothing. She nods once. She keeps working. You leave the parchment. You do not report her, and you never speak of her again. But you remember the way she mouthed the words as she wrote them, like prayer. Once, a man was caught reading in Occitan. A bishop called him before the town, asked him what gave him the right. The man said, "I was born with ears and eyes. I assumed I was meant to use them." He smiled as he said it. They cut out his tongue that night, but not his eyes. They say he read until the end of his life. The lanterns use symbols. A drop of wax on a doorstep means a book is nearby. 3 dots carved into the bottom of a crucifix means safe passage. A leaf of dried sage folded in a psalter means it's been copied and passed on. The monks know some of this, but they do not speak of it, because even those who fear the fire sometimes miss the light. You begin noticing odd movements, blank parchment disappearing faster than usual, ink bottles misplaced, then returned, candle stubs with strange colored wax green, black, ash gray. Small things. But small things make up a revolution. One night, the abbot calls for a meeting. He says there has been theft. He says someone is defacing holy pages. He says heretics are known to hide meaning in footnotes. He says this will be investigated. His eyes linger on you too long. You say nothing. You fold your hands. You bow. And when you leave, your pulse fills your ears like a hymn. You return to the scriptorium later, not to copy, just to look. You go to the cupboard, the black one, but it's still empty. Still waiting. Instead, you search for glosses, the small, sideways ones. The ones in corners. You begin to see them differently now. Not as errors, but as seeds buried under Scripture, waiting to bloom. You find one in a psalter written a century ago. It reads, "If God needed Latin, he would have sent it by angel. He sent flesh instead." You copy it down, not in the margin, In your memory, you light no candle that night. You read it again in the dark. And this time, you understand. There's a myth passed between scribes, never spoken aloud, only scratched into the underside of benches or sewn into the folds of travel cloaks. Every book wants to be read. It sounds innocent, almost charming, but here in these walls, it's a warning. Because what wants to be read will always find a way. It will linger in the candle smoke. It will echo through the choir's monotone chant. It will press itself into the fibers of your dreams. And eventually it will speak. You've begun to recognize the faces of those who carry these hidden words, not because they speak them, but because they listen differently, because they linger too long in corners of the library that were never officially built, because they nod at passages no one reads aloud. Brother Everard is one of them. He limps slightly, an old wound from before his vows. He's in charge of oil for the lamps. No one pays him much mind. But you've seen it. How he dips his fingers into the ink just a little too often. How he sharpens quills that no one claims. How the supply room has one drawer that never fully closes. You looked once. Inside were fragments. Not full pages, just phrases, copied by different hands. Some in charcoal, some in pencil, one in blood. You didn't take them, but you remember what they said. There are no heresies, only unfinished truths. God does not fear questions. Translation is not rebellion. It is love in another tongue. It is winter when the Inquisitor arrives. No announcement, no procession. Just a black-robed figure on a mud-covered horse carrying a book too clean for travel. His face is soft, but his eyes are old. He does not smile. They say he's only here for one night. They say he's passing through, but the monks clean the chapel floor 3 times, and the abbot hasn't slept. You're called to recite a prayer during supper, out loud, from memory. You choose Psalm 90. You recite slowly, perfectly. But when you reach the line, "He shall cover thee with his feathers," the Inquisitor raises his eyes and asks, "What language did David speak?" You freeze. You answer, "Hebrew." He nods. Then, "Why then do you not read it in Hebrew?" The question is soft, but it carves the air like a blade. The room goes silent. You bow. You do not answer. He does not press. But you know, in that moment, he has measured your breath and found it slightly off. The next day, 2 novices are removed. No reason given. No farewell. Just a list with their names struck through in the library ledger. You read the entries. One of them once asked you if sacrifice meant giving or being taken. You didn't answer then. You wouldn't know how to now. You return to the cellar. Not to see the woman again, she is gone. Not to touch the press, it has been dismantled. Only the base remains, soaked in wax and wine. But on the wall, barely visible in candlelight, someone has written a line. He who forgets the light cannot curse the dark. The ink is still wet. That evening, you stay in the scriptorium long after the bells. You copy not scripture, not decree, not even gloss, just phrases, lines, fragments you remember hearing in the hush of forbidden rooms. You don't know what you'll do with them. You only know they should not vanish. Not entirely. Not while your hands still know how to write. You press them onto the page like prayers that never asked for permission. You do not sign your name, but in the margin, you leave a dot. Then 2, then 3, stacked vertically. The lanterns will know what it means. The fire is never built in a hurry. Not for this. It begins quietly. A few logs, a few hands, no chants, no bells. Only the slow, careful motion of men trained to burn things that were meant to be read. It's early spring, and yet the mornings remain bitter. The sun rises later than it should. Or maybe it simply doesn't want to look. You are sent to the chapel to retrieve an old hymnal. Nothing suspicious. A routine errand. Except the moment you enter, you smell it. Jar. Not of bread. Not of candles, but of parchment. The scent of ink turned to ash. On the altar, a pile of singed pages rests like an offering. Half a spine, broken. Wax pooled on a corner. A ribbon, scorched but still red. You recognize the binding. It belonged to a psalter with unauthorized margins. Someone must have seen, reported, decided that silence alone wasn't enough. Now the book is gone, but the smell remains. You try not to breathe it in, but it clings to you, like smoke from a truth too close to the flame. Later, you hear whispers, not just among the novices, but the elders. Not words, movements, hesitations. The copying hall is quiet in a new way, the kind of silence that listens back. Brother Everard no longer limps. He walks quickly now. Too quickly. You haven't seen him since that night in the cellar. When you ask, no one answers. They just point to a folded robe on his chair, and beside it, his lamp, still full, but no flame. In the dining hall, the prayers before meals grow shorter, less poetic, more precise, stripped of their flourishes, like even the holy words are afraid of being misunderstood. You overhear a novice whisper to another. They're watching the syllables now. You pretend not to hear, but you feel it too. The tightening, the closing in, like walls made of pages pressed too tightly together. The inquisitor stays longer than expected. One night becomes 3, then a week. No one questions it. He speaks little, but reads constantly. He asks to see the library ledgers. He visits the scriptorium after hours, and he lights his own fire, not in the hearth, in the courtyard, where the smoke rises against the chapel's steeple, where the ashes land on gravestones. They say the fire is for warmth, but you've seen the way it's built wide at the base, narrow at the top, the kind made for burning pages, not bread. One evening, you walk past it after Vespers. It's not lit yet, but a pile sits nearby. Not logs, not branches, books, wrapped, tied. Some marked, some not. You spot one with a scrap of green ribbon, the mark of the lanterns. You don't stop. You don't dare. But your hands clench so tightly, they ache through the night. There is talk of a list. Not the book list, a people list. You hear it whispered in the hallway between the infirmary and the kitchen. Brother Juste says it isn't alphabetical. Brother Martin says it's worse. It's in order of silence. The loudest heretics first, the quiet ones last, the ones who hide well enough to make the fire nervous. You ask no questions. But that night, you check your lamp. You fill it with oil. You don't light it. You only set it by the window. So if they come, you can see them first. You dream of books that whisper, not in words, not in language, just movement, pages fluttering like breath, covers opening slowly, like hands held out in warning. You see a page fall into the fire, and instead of burning, it sings. You wake up with the taste of ash in your mouth. The woman from the cellar returns. Not to the press, it's gone now, but to the chapel. You see her from the corner of your eye during morning service. She doesn't kneel. She doesn't sing. She sits in the back, holding a candle with no wick. You want to ask her what she's waiting for, but you already know. She's waiting for the dark. She's waiting for the book that isn't there. She's waiting to remember. You begin to notice a change in yourself. Not fear, not exactly. Something quieter. You look at Scripture differently now. Not as a wall to climb, but a mirror to polish. You see where words have been rearranged, where meanings have been softened, where justice has been changed to obedience, where truth has become law. The fire is not only outside now, it burns in the footnotes. It smolders between the lines. It flares every time someone closes a book too quickly. They burn 3 books on Friday. The inquisitor doesn't speak as he watches. He holds a bell. He rings it once with each text. Not for mourning, not for prayer, just so that the air remembers. That night, you find a ribbon beneath your desk. Black thread, braided. No note, no parchment, just thread. And on the floor, near your stool, a mark made of soot. A crescent, a shape you've seen before. In a gloss, in a fragment, in a dream. You sit, you wait, and in the morning, you begin to copy. Not from the assigned text. Not today. You write what you remember. Not for the abbey, not for yourself, but for the ones who read in the dark, for the ones who carry books like weapons, for the ones who burn differently. You hear that the fire has gone out, that the wood is wet, that the ashes refuse to rise. The inquisitor leaves the next day. No ceremony, no blessing, just a horse that doesn't turn back. And somewhere in the walls, in a drawer no longer checked, the ribbon waits beside a page. And that page, finally, quietly, is ready to be read. They say it's just a table. Wood, nails, dust in the grain. But if you listen closely, it hums. Not with sound, but with memory. A vibration left behind by things copied, printed, spread. The table is in a wine cellar, but it does not hold wine. The barrels are there, yes, stacked in solemn rows, but something else is tucked beneath the floorboards. Something that breathes through ink. Something that waits. A press. Not large, not loud, but real and alive. You are not the first to find it. Someone leads you there. No names, no questions. They knock 3 times on the wood above the cellar. Once long, twice short. and wait. Then, a reply, the sound of a nail being drawn from soft pine. A panel shifts, and the air beneath the monastery changes. It smells like paper, smoke, and iron. It smells like risk, and something older, hope, maybe, or revolution. The press is small. It would not survive an army, but it could change one. It's built from scraps, a butcher's block, a shoemaker's brace, the crankshaft of a broken gate. Its ink is thick, tar-like. No perfume of parchment here. This is no scriptorium. You run your fingers along the press's frame. It's stained, not with blood, but with effort. Hands have gripped this wood in fear, others in faith, some in both. The lanterns call it St. Johann's bones. They name it after Gutenberg, but not with reverence, with quiet defiance. He let the words out. Now it's their job to keep them moving. They do not print scripture. Not exactly. They print the gaps, the missing verses, the lines that were never copied, the endings that didn't survive the councils and edits and gold leaf censorship. They print letters, too, accounts, witnesses, a monk who saw a text burned before he could finish copying it, a woman who memorized a banned gospel and recited it by candlelight to 3 generations, a child who could not read but could still speak the forbidden words his mother whispered before sleep. They print it all, and the pages move, folded into baskets of fruit, tucked between cloth in washing barrels, slipped between hymnal pages in unsuspecting chapels, left in confessionals. You ask how long they've been doing this. They answer, long enough for a bishop to quote one of our lines, not knowing where it came from. You smile, but only with your eyes, because down here, even joy is a risk. The ink is made by a woman named Milla. No last name, no title. She speaks rarely. When she does, it's only to the press. She warms the ink in a small copper pot, whispers to it, stirs it counterclockwise. She says clockwise ink doesn't stick to certain kinds of lies. You watch her dip the rollers. She moves with certainty, not grace. This is not holy work. It is necessary work. They show you the latest page, just one, fresh from the press, still wet at the corners. No signature, no attribution, just a title, the Mass of the Untranslated, and beneath it a single line. If you fear the page in your own tongue, then the fear is not of error, but of understanding. You read it once, then again. It fits in the palm of your hand, but it feels heavier than any Bible you've ever copied. Someone passes you a bundle, folded pages wrapped in cloth, sealed with wax. They say nothing, but their look says it all. You carry this now, whether you choose to or not. Back in your cell, you hide the bundle in your mattress. You sleep facing the wall. You do not dream, but your hand itches, the one that touched the press. It smells of ink. Still, even after scrubbing, even after prayer, even after you stop trying to remove it. In the refectory, the monks eat more quietly than usual. The inquisitor is gone, but his shadow lingers. You see it in the way they pass the bread, in the way their eyes do not rise from their bowls, in the way silence now has a shape, and that shape is fear. But you also see something else. A scrap of parchment tucked into the napkin of a young novice. He doesn't react when he finds it, but he doesn't throw it away either. He folds it smaller and slips it into his sleeve. That night, a page from the Mass of the Untranslated is found in the candle drawer. No one claims it. No one reads it aloud. But it isn't destroyed either. Just moved. Placed in the corner beside the prayer stool. As if it might burn differently. As if it might pray differently. You visit the cellar again. Alone this time. You run the press. One sheet. Then another. Then 3 more. The crank squeaks. The wood groans. The rollers smear. It doesn't matter. The words come out crooked. Imperfect. But they come. There is a quote carved into the table edge. Books are not afraid of the dark. You don't know who wrote it, but you believe them. Because down here, in the earth beneath prayer, you realize something. You were never a scribe. You were never just a copyist. You were always part of the press. You always had ink on your hands. You just didn't know what it meant. Until now. They don't look like books. Not anymore. Folded too many times. Corners worn thin. No gilded covers. No title pages. No illuminations of angels in blues and gold. Just ink. Raw. Pressed in haste. Stamped with breath, not blessing. But they move. Faster than scripture. Faster than sermons. Faster than fear. They move through cities, fields, workshops, and silence. They pass from hand to hand like a rumor with teeth. A new bundle arrives in the village, carried not by a monk or priest, but by a butcher's daughter with mud on her hem and a sparrow stitched into her sleeve. She doesn't speak as she hands it to you, only nods, then vanishes back into the crowd. You open the bundle behind the chapel. Inside are 15 pages, each one different, each one marked by a small symbol, a lantern, faint and crooked, drawn in black wax. The ink is darker than usual, less refined, heavy strokes, quick lines, but the words breathe. You sit, you read. The first page begins. We were told the saints chose silence, but some of them died screaming the psalms in their own tongue. The second, they erased Mary's song and rewrote it in Latin, but the song still lives in the mouths of mothers. The third, there is no heresy in understanding, only in fearing it. By the 7th page, your hands are shaking. By the 10th, you're crying. By the last, you are changed. You read the final line again, slowly. This book has no saints, only survivors. And beneath it, make more. You tuck the pages beneath your robe. You walk back through the chapel, past the confessional, past the shelf of hymnals. You reach the scriptorium. The others are there, copying the day's assigned passage, a genealogy list from the Gospel of Matthew. They write names, begats, lines without breath. You sit at your desk. You dip your quill. And instead of copying what you're given, you copy what you read, line by line, the books with no saints. At first, no one notices. Then Brother Juste leans over your shoulder. He says nothing, but his eyes pause too long on one phrase, screaming the psalms in their own tongue. You meet his gaze. He says, "Fix the spelling," and walks away. But the corner of his mouth twitches, not in scorn, in something else, recognition. That night, you find your copy gone, the one you made, not in your drawer, not in your bed, not in the fire, but beneath your plate in the dining hall, folded, with an extra page, one you didn't write, a reply. We are many. Some are in cloisters, some in kitchens, some in the choir. You are not alone. The books begin to appear in strange places, sewn into the linings of novice robes, pressed between loaves of communion bread, written by hand on the inside of shutters. The chapel has never looked more holy or more dangerous. You receive a bundle marked not with a lantern, but with a skull drawn in ink. Inside, 5 pages. These ones are different. No poems, no testimony, just names, dates, towns, and how they died. Brother Eloy smothered in sleep Rouen. Sister Roselle burned in Orchard Artois. Father Alban drowned beneath Psalm's lion. A list of martyrs no one prays for, because no one was told they existed. Until now. You copy this list 3 times. You hide one behind the altar, one beneath the bell rope, and one you fold tightly and leave inside the Inquisitor's old quarters. They call them ghost gospels, not because they're fake, but because they're not supposed to be seen, not supposed to be heard, not supposed to be real. But they are, and they multiply. You hear of entire villages with no priests, only readers, old men who once herded sheep now quoting Paul in Flemish, midwives reciting Apocrypha while preparing tea, children chanting a version of the Beatitudes that mentions hunger for knowledge. None of them have ever seen a Latin page, and yet they believe, and yet they spread. You wonder what happens when the people who read more than they're told outnumber those who don't? What happens when the unsanctioned books outnumber the safe ones? What happens when the only difference between the sacred and the silenced is ink? In your cell, you light a candle. You unwrap one of the last bundles, and you write a line not from scripture, not from memory, but from you. If saints are chosen by Rome, let ghosts be chosen by fire. You fold it, seal it, and slip it into the next outgoing basket of bread. One afternoon, you pass the vestry. The door is cracked just enough. Inside, Brother Alain is cleaning candlesticks. He is alone. He hums softly, not a hymn, a melody you heard once in the village, carried by a mother with no books in her home. A forbidden tune, soft and rising like steam from a bowl of broth. You do not interrupt him. You listen, because sometimes music carries words without needing to say them, and this one speaks more than scripture. In the weeks that follow, things begin to change, not loudly, but slowly. The pages are fewer, but the copies increase. Not all books survive long, but their words scatter like seeds. You begin to see certain phrases again, slightly altered, slipped into margin glosses, footnotes, even the occasional sermon. There is no heresy in clarity. God does not need gatekeepers, only light. Understanding is not the enemy of belief. One morning, the abbot preaches a passage from Luke. He hesitates on a phrase, looks up, then finishes in French. Not the whole verse, just the last line. But everyone hears it. and no one corrects him. The church bells ring differently now, slower, as if carrying the weight of every word that once had to be whispered. One evening, as you walk the cloister path, you notice symbols carved low into the stone walls. You kneel to see them closer. They are small, faint, 3 dots. Then a lantern. Then a line. It is not a crime to know. You don't know who carved it. But it wasn't alone. 10 more markings follow in the next corridor. One of the novices, barely old enough to shave, approaches you in the garden. He doesn't ask directly. He simply says, "If I wanted to read what they burned, where would I begin?" You pause. You study his eyes. He is afraid. But more than that, he is ready. You don't give him a book. You give him a name of a woman who lives on the edge of town. She binds herbs into cloth and delivers soup to the infirmary. She also hides 4 books under her floorboards. None with saints, all with truth. And then a letter arrives, folded into the folds of a donated cloak, marked with a feather. It is written not in ink, but in soot, pressed with a reed. Quick, messy, urgent. They are coming from the south. 3 carts, 2 monks, 1 fire. Hide what you cannot copy. Copy what you cannot hide. We are still many, but not enough yet. You meet in the cellar. Not all. Just the ones who carry more than prayer in their mouths. Milla sharpens the press. You pour the ink. A new type. Darker, thicker, faster to dry. The page this time is not poetry, not testimony. It is instruction on how to build, how to bind, how to write in code, how to survive a raid, how to bury books wrapped in oilskin beneath salt. The header reads, "For the ones who will need this after us." The fire arrives. Just after the frost breaks. No horsemen, no trumpets, just carts, plain, covered, heavy, monks with faces like doors never opened. One nods to the abbot. He nods back. No surprise. He knew. They enter the chapel first, then the scriptorium, then the library. They ask no questions. They just open drawers and light matches. They burn 6 books, 4 safe, 2 marked, all watched. You stand outside. You do not weep. You do not shout. You copy, in your memory, every phrase, every margin, every line that flickers before it turns to smoke. You hold those ashes in your chest now. They are heavy and warm and alive. It starts with the floorboards, the ones beneath the old bench in the copying hall. Someone pried them open, not carefully, not like the lanterns do. This was rushed, panicked. They found pages there, not books, fragments, scraps of translated psalms, a half-finished copy of a gospel in German, a prayer for the hungry, written by a woman who had never seen a monastery. The pages are laid on the altar, not in reverence, in accusation. The abbot calls a meeting. Everyone must attend, even the sick, even the old ones who haven't copied in years. The chapel is full of breath and silence. He says nothing for a long time. Then he reads the fragments aloud, slowly, like poison being named. The words are familiar. You copied some of them yourself. Others you read by stolen candlelight. One you wrote. You feel it in your bones when he speaks it. Not just recognition, ownership, grief. He says the words are dangerous, that they were never meant to be understood alone. That Latin protects, that vernacular corrupts. That reading must remain a guided path, not an open field. Then he asks a question, not to anyone in particular, not to you, but close enough. Who will answer for this? The chapel remains still. The candles flicker. Your hands sweat. You say nothing. No one does. The next morning, they find Brother Juste gone, not vanished, removed. His cell is empty. His desk is bare. But inside his drawer, a single word scratched into the wood, copy. That night, no one eats. They begin searching cells. First the novices, then the elders. Eventually, yours. You stand aside. Your lamp is still warm. Your hands still ink-stained. They open your mattress, your drawer, your boots, but they find nothing, because what they're looking for, you've already hidden inside your memory. Some pages you never wrote down. Some you rewrote so many times you can still see the lines when you close your eyes. Some you whispered into cracks in the stone, so the walls would remember even if you could not. Because that's the truth. They can take the books. They can burn the ink. They can scour the margins. But they cannot unknow what has been known. And that is the true heresy. One morning, you find Milla in the cellar. The press is gone, but she still stirs the ink. She dips her hand into it. Not a quill. Her hand. She paints a line on the wall. Then another. A lantern. Then a word. Still, you do the same. A week passes. The fire dies down. The fear settles, but not into peace. Into quiet preparation. Into memory. Into ink that doesn't wash. You see a novice writing something during a meal. Not scripture. Not decree. He folds it. Passes it down the table. You pretend not to notice. But when it reaches you, you open it. One line. It lives. Keep copying. The press is gone, yes, but not lost. They carried it out in pieces. One wheel went into the well. The frame burned in the bread oven. The rollers disappeared into crates bound for Rouen. But the crank, Milla kept the crank. Not as a tool, as a memory. She keeps it wrapped in linen, buried beneath a basket of onions. Every few days, she turns it once. Not to print, just so it doesn't forget how to move. You asked her why she still keeps it. She said, because when the next one is built, it will already know the sound it must make. The monastery remains quiet, but the kind of quiet that fills your ears too fully, the kind that presses against your ribs. No one speaks of Brother Juste. No one mentions the burn pile, but the ink still disappears faster than it should, and parchment reappears in strange places. A folded scrap beneath the choir robes, a margin gloss where none should be, a psalter with a blank page torn out and replaced with handwriting you don't recognize, but somehow trust. The ink is different now, thicker, darker, less refined. It stains longer. Even after 3 washings, it still clings to your thumb, no matter how hard you scrub. One of the pages that survived the search is passed to you during Vespers. It's rolled into a hollowed candle. You break the wax in your cell. Inside, a testimony. Not from a monk, from a merchant's wife in Calais. I could not read until I was 30. Now I read to my children each night, and we do not fear damnation, only forgetting. My son copied a verse today and asked if it was allowed. I told him, if it helps you love truth, it is already holy. You do not cry, but you memorize every line, and then you burn it yourself, not out of fear, but to keep it from them. It is safer in your chest than in their hands. Someone has begun singing again in the cloisters. Not Latin, a lullaby, old and low, that rises with the scent of damp stone. You pause when you hear it, because even a melody now is a kind of protest, a kind of record, a kind of ink. The lanterns send another page. This one arrives sewn into the hem of a novice's habit. It's not a gospel. It's a recipe for ink. Ash, oil, soot, walnut, vinegar, and blood. You read it twice. Not because it's unclear, but because the last instruction is written in red. This ink will never wash. Use only if you do not wish to forget. You begin mixing your own, quietly. At night, using scraps, you hide the pot behind your desk. You name it, memory. You dip your quill and write. He who burns a page cannot burn what it became in the reader. Then fold it. Place it beneath your bed. Not to hide it, but to sleep beside it. The abbot walks slower now. He watches more, but says less. One evening, he stands in the library doorway and asks, "Why is the Psalter missing page 43? No one answers. But behind the shelf, the wall has been inked. Tiny writing. The missing psalm, and one added line. This psalm was too alive for paper. A final fire is declared. Not large, not public, but everyone knows. They pile the suspect pages. You see one flutter, a hand-copied line from the Sermon on the Mount, but in French. Someone protests. Not loudly, not by name, but someone removes the page before it's thrown in. They place it on the chapel altar. Light no candles. Say no prayers. But they leave it open, as if God might wish to read it. And then one day it rains. A full day. Cold, slanting, soaking rain. It leaks through the walls, drips into the script room, stains the ledgers, fills the fire pit with water. The books do not burn that day, because the sky chose differently, because heaven, perhaps, remembered. You go back to your desk and begin to copy again, not from the approved volumes, but from what you remember, from what you've read, from what you've dreamed, and your hand does not tremble, because you know now, this ink is not yours. You are just the hand it borrowed, and you are no longer afraid. There are ashes in the seams now. You can feel them when you run your fingers along the hem of your robe, the rough edges where someone once unpicked and stitched something inside. It isn't ink, not exactly, but it carries the shape of words, pressed flat into linen, folded so tightly the fabric holds memory the way parchment once held breath. After the last fire, this is where the pages go. Not to the shelves, not to the library, but to the sleeves, the belts, the cuffs, to the hidden places, the folds that priests do not inspect, where scripture hums just beneath the thread. Milla is the first to teach you. You find her in the infirmary, not mixing ink, not boiling leaves, but sewing. At first, it looks like mending. Then you see the glint of something between the cloth. A page, not bound, just pressed between lining and wool, written in the same cramped hand she used for lantern messages, still wet at the corners. You whisper, "It will smudge." She replies, "Then it will blur with the threads, and the thread will remember better than I do." The other seamstresses begin to follow. In silence, no pact, no meeting, just one robe, then another, then dozens. Hems grow heavier, thread becomes scripture, buttons are backed with gospel, waistbands hold verses twisted like prayer knots. You wear your robe differently now. It weighs more, but the weight comforts you, because the holy is still there, even if the pages are gone. Not all scripture is worn. Some is breathed. Some is baked. Brother Etienne, who kneads bread for the abbey, begins pressing letters into loaves, tiny ones, too faint to notice if you're not looking. He uses a broken stamp, each letter reversed, so it burns forward in the crust. You see them once, cooling on a shelf, a line from the Beatitudes baked into rye, another from Ecclesiastes tucked inside a boule. He never says a word, but every monk knows which loaves to take, and which ones feed the memory of the missing. Someone begins sewing books into walls, not full ones, just pages, half lines, enough to build a sentence if you know where to press your ear. There's a niche behind the altar where a brick is loose. You press it inward one day and find a folded scrap. Truth does not rot. It waits. You fold it again. You put it back. You replace the brick. You meet a man in the village who sells salt. He never looks you in the eye, never speaks above a murmur. But when you buy from him, he hands you the pouch, heavy. He winks and says, "Mind the lining." Inside, not just salt, a rolled parchment sealed with wax and rosemary. You do not read it in the daylight. You do not read it in the abbey. You wait until night. It is not poetry. It is not gospel. It is a map, not of roads, of hiding places, spots where books were buried, under a hollow tree, behind a crumbled well, beneath a chapel stone that no one prays beside anymore. You memorize it, then place it into the coals of your stove, not to destroy it, but to make sure its smoke rises where the words cannot. They call them ember scripts now, not books, not pamphlets, just fragments, ash-marked, smoke-scented, scorched into cloth and breath and bread. Someone says they've reached Navarre. Another says they were sung in a tavern in Flanders. Someone else swears they saw a page sewn into a bishop's glove. Whether it's true doesn't matter, because stories spread faster than law. And faith, once fragmented, cannot be caged. There's a legend forming now, not among monks, but among children. They say there's a book that reads itself, a book made of ash and thread, buried in the roots of a fallen tree. They say it sings if you place your ear to the bark. They say it only reads to those who've lost someone for knowing too much. You hear a novice telling it in the garden one morning. He pauses when he sees you listening. You nod and say, "I hope the tree is still growing." One evening, a cart arrives from the north, unmarked, unblessed, drawn by a mule too old for war, too stubborn for death. The driver says nothing, only passes you a sack. You open it in private. Inside, not food, not ink, not even pages, cloth, layered, worn, patched with strange stitching. At first, it looks like rags. But then your fingers find the shape of something pressed between the layers. You peel back one fold, then another. Not words. Not yet. Just impressions. Pressure marks left behind by pages that no longer exist. You hold it to the light and see them. Faint lines, like breath, like a ghost of a sentence. You hold the cloth to your cheek. You close your eyes, and you hear it. The next morning, you leave one of your own, a robe no longer worn, hung behind the chapel door. Inside its lining, 4 psalms, 1 letter, and a question: if no one is left to read it, is it still holy? You do not sign it, but you press a black thread into the hem. 3 knots, 1 for truth, 1 for memory, 1 for whatever comes next. Someone takes the robe. You never see who. But a week later, a novice enters wearing it. He looks at you just long enough to nod, not in thanks, but in understanding, as if to say, "I found it, and I will carry it farther." This is how it spreads now, in silence, in breath, in the spaces between seams, between bricks, between hearts that still dare to carry weight without needing to speak. The abbey remains quiet, but not dead, never dead, because what was saved in ashes is not gone, only hidden, only waiting, only stitched into the future, one thread at a time. The first time you hear it, it's humming, not loud, not clear, just a tune drifting from the far end of the corridor where the novices' quarters meet the cloister walk. It doesn't sound like a hymn, too uneven, too soft, too human, but there's something familiar in it, a rhythm, a pattern, a rise and fall that nudges something in your chest. You follow it. Around the corner, you find a boy no older than 12, mending sandals, humming as he works. The melody continues, but the moment he sees you, it stops. You ask him where he learned it. He shrugs and says, "I don't know. I think it's always been there." In the days that follow, you hear it again. From another boy, this one carrying water. Then from a girl delivering herbs to the sick. Then from the wind itself, whistling through cracked stained glass in the chapel's east wall. It's not the same each time. Sometimes it rises. Sometimes it drops. But the bones are there, the way a prayer has bones. The way memory sometimes remembers what the mind forgets. One day, someone adds words. Softly, in the back of the chapel, too faint to catch all at once. But the words cling. The page is ash, but still it sings. The saint was burned, but not his wings. The bell is gone. The sound remains. The ink is washed, but not the names. You stop asking where it came from. You begin to understand it was never written. Not formally. Not with quill or ink or seal. It was passed like a hand on a shoulder. Like fire in a hidden bowl. Like grief turned into rhythm. They call it the Black Psalm. Not because it mourns, but because it survives. It's the song the ink remembered. You ask Brother Elaine, the oldest monk still alive in the abbey, if he's heard it before. He doesn't answer at first. Then he says, they sang it once after the burning at Lyon. After they threw the presses into the Rhone, they thought the words would drown, but they floated. On wood, on memory, on breath. And so it begins to spread. No pages, no bindings, no signatures, only verses carried in mouths, between meals, between prayers, between the noise of one bell and the next. A child sings it while feeding the hens. An old man mutters it as he sweeps the stairs. Two novices harmonize its refrain, though they've never spoken to each other before. And in every version, a new line appears. She wore the page beneath her skin. He carved a verse into the wind. The stone was blank, but still it spoke. The fire came. The memory woke. One evening, Milla adds her own. She doesn't sing. She never sings. But in the scriptorium, while preparing ink, she whispers into the open air, if you can't read it, then remember it. If they take the words, become the script. The abbot hears the song one morning. He says nothing, but he pauses in the cloister and listens for longer than expected, then turns and walks away. You begin writing it down, not to preserve it, to understand it. You gather lines from novices, from pages slipped under doors, from dreams. You write them in margins, on scraps, behind unused psalters. The verses do not always match, but they always rhyme, not in sound, in feeling, in grief, in weight, in the way they settle in your ribs like dust in the folds of a robe. One day, the song is carried by birds. You hear it from the window. 3 sparrows, pecking grain. Their cries match the meter, the same rhythm as the refrain sung at dawn, the same count, the same pause, the same rise before the end. You wonder if it's coincidence. But then a page flutters across the stones, and on it, in a child's hand, the birds don't know the words, but they carry the tune. One afternoon, a stranger arrives. A woman, veiled, tired. She kneels in the chapel, says nothing. But when the candles are lit and the bells toll for supper, she sings. Alone, clear, one verse of the Black Psalm, but with a verse you've never heard. There is a book beneath the well. Its spine is ash, but it reads well. Its pages bleed but never fade. It holds the names they never made. No one stops her. No one joins her. But everyone listens. Even the abbot, even the wind. She leaves at dawn. No one sees her go. But where she knelt, there is a bundle of cloth, and inside it, a list of verses, of names, of places where the song has been sung, in villages, in forests, in convents with no surviving books, but full of memory. You copy the list, not into a book, onto your sleeve, stitched in fine black thread. So if they burn you, it will still be there, tight to the bone, quiet in the seam, a verse no fire can cleanse. One night, you hear it in your sleep, the song, not as a sound, but as breath. You dream of a burning chapel, not in fear, but in warmth. The flames do not consume, they illuminate. Books crackle, but the words rise into the smoke like birds. You open your mouth, and the refrain leaves you, even as you forget the dream. In the morning, the tune remains. It hums behind the bells. It follows your steps. It echoes in the way wind moves through the shutter cracks. It is not yours. It never was. But it lives in you now. Brother Everard's grave was never marked, but someone has scratched 4 lines into the stone beside the orchard. You find them on a walk. He carried none, he copied all. His quill was ash, his tongue a wall. They thought him gone, they thought him still, but he is the refrain they cannot kill. You sit beside the stone and hum. For the first time, the earth hums back. It doesn't look like a garden, not at first. Just a stretch of uneven dirt beside the chapel, too narrow for vegetables, too damp for prayer benches. A place forgotten by design, where sunlight pools only briefly before vanishing into moss. But if you step closer, if you let your eye rest, your foot slow, you begin to see it. A small dip in the soil, a pattern in the stones, a mound that's not quite natural. And then you understand. This garden grows no herbs, no lilies, no food. It grows memory. You learn of it from Milla. Of course it's Milla. She brings you there one morning without a word, carries a jar, wrapped in linen, heavy. You don't ask. She doesn't explain. She kneels at the base of a half-dead olive tree, brushes aside the leaves, digs a shallow circle with her hands. The soil is soft, as if it's been moved before, many times. She places the jar inside, covers it, smooths it, then finally says, "That one was a child's gospel, handwritten, all in rhyme. They won't find it here." You kneel beside her. You see more now? The slight inconsistencies in the earth, the way certain roots bend around corners, as if making room for things that shouldn't be buried, but were, because no one else would keep them. There are other jars. You count 7 visible mounds, but that's only what time hasn't flattened. Each one is different, sealed with wax or pitch or oil-soaked cloth, marked with symbols too faint to mean anything, unless you already know them. A lantern, a broken quill, a circle with a line through it, like a coin split in silence. She calls it the garden beneath the chapel, not because it belongs to the church, but because the chapel is the only place no one dares to dig. They wouldn't desecrate the ground, she says. Not if they think it's only dirt and saints. You ask how long it's been here. She shrugs. Longer than me. Longer than you. Maybe longer than the chapel. And from that moment on, you become its caretaker. Not its priest. Not its owner. Its soil. Its steward. Its silence. You learn how to wrap the pages. Not too tight, they crack. Not too loose, they rot. Wrapped in cotton, dipped in wax, placed inside clay. Each jar is lined with rosemary, sometimes sage, not for sanctity, for scent, so the dogs won't dig. You bury your first manuscript 2 weeks later. A Psalter in Dutch, 14 pages, hand-copied. The ink still smells of smoke. You place it beneath a flat stone behind the olive. Mark the spot with a white thread tied around the base of a nearby root, invisible unless you're looking. And you whisper, "Grow," not as a prayer, as a command. Others begin to add their own. A blind monk buries 3 pages from the Book of Ruth, the only lines he ever memorized. A midwife leaves a folded cloth sewn with the Sermon on the Mount. She kisses the jar before placing it. A baker offers a list of the names of those who disappeared. No verses, just names. Names no one else will speak. The garden grows, not in color, not in height, but in depth and meaning. You dream of roots now, twisting through psalms, splitting margins, curling around forgotten metaphors. One root carries a line from Ecclesiastes into the foot of the chapel wall. Another breaks through a jar, but doesn't tear the page. It holds it. Someone begins sketching maps, not on parchment, in memory. The garden has spread. A second site beneath the old stable. A third beneath the cobbler's hut. A fourth in the abbess's crypt. They plant books like bulbs. They call it scripture in the soil. You keep a ledger, not of content, only of weight. How many jars? How many steps from the olive tree? How deep? You never name the texts. You never name the writers. Only the distance from memory to memory. One day, a child arrives at the abbey. He carries a bundle of firewood, too young for robes, too alert for innocence. He kneels by the chapel wall and places a small linen-wrapped stone beneath a loose tile. You watch him. He glances up, then smiles. It's my grandmother's prayer. She used to whisper it when the bells were silent. You mark the spot in your ledger, but not the name. Only a line. Spoken prayer, folded into silence, buried in a child's hands. The abbey begins to suspect something. The abbot walks the grounds more often, pauses too long near the olive, mentions soil drainage during supper, sends novices to tend the roots. They never find anything, because the garden doesn't want to be found, because the garden remembers where not to grow. One day, you receive a jar. From nowhere. No one claims it. It appears in your cell. You unwrap it slowly. Inside, not scripture, not even words, just a single feather, wrapped in thread, pressed between leaves. You understand. You dig a spot at the center of the garden, bury it there, and weep. Because even silence deserves a grave. Winter comes early that year. The earth hardens before you're ready. Frost dusts the chapel roof. The trees sag with cold, and the garden stills. Not dead, only sleeping. You light a candle near the olive, not for warmth, not for prayer, just to see the breath of the soil. It rises in little curls, not smoke, not steam, but memory exhaled. You whisper to the ground. You don't expect an answer, but you feel something shift, just slightly beneath your knees. A sigh, maybe, or a stirring, or a page turning. One morning, the child returns. The same one who left his grandmother's prayer. He sits beside the olive tree and hums. It's the tune from the Black Psalm, but slower, softer, sadder. You sit with him. You don't speak. There's no need. You just listen. When he leaves, he presses something into your hand. A small root wrapped in twine. It grew near her prayer, he says. Maybe it remembers. You plant it, and for the first time, something green rises from the soil. Not holy, not marked, just living. Proof that words buried well do not stay dead. They don't tell you when it happens. No bell tolls. No announcement from the pulpit. No ceremony. But one morning, you look around the scriptorium and realize you are the last. The desks are still there. The lamps, the scrolls, the wax, the oil, the dust gathers just the same. But the others are gone. Some were taken, some left willingly. Some stopped writing so slowly it wasn't clear they'd stopped at all. And now you sit alone, quill in hand, and wonder what it means to be a scribe when there is no longer a script you're allowed to write. The abbey has changed, not suddenly, like wood warping beneath years of slow water. Nothing breaks, but nothing fits the same. The chants remain, but quieter. The pages are copied, but never questioned. The margins grow thinner. The candles burn shorter. The prayers repeat too easily. You used to hear questions in the corridors. Now you hear footsteps and silence. The novices are younger now, their eyes less curious, their Latin perfect, their memory sharp, but their wonder is missing. You still write, not the sanctioned texts, those come easily, without thought, but at night, in the shadows beneath your desk, you copy what isn't there, not full books, just fragments, lines, the ink smudged by your own breath. The pages hidden behind the false bottom of a drawer no one checks anymore. You don't know who you're writing for, only that your hands haven't forgotten, and that forgetting feels like sin. Sometimes, you walk the old paths, past the olive tree, past the broken tiles behind the chapel. You kneel where the garden was. You do not dig. You do not speak. You place your hand on the soil and wait. For what? You're not sure, but you feel it still. The hum of hidden things, of buried pages and names and prayers that never made it into the canon. The earth has become your scripture now. There's a new abbot, young, smooth-handed. His eyes never touch the shadows. He speaks often of clarity, of purification, of unifying the language of the faith. He praises obedience more than wisdom. He speaks Latin beautifully, but you've heard him misquote the Psalms. You said nothing, because now words are no longer corrected, only repeated. One night, you find an old page, not one of yours, one of Everard's, folded behind a loose stone, faded to near invisibility. Just one line remains legible. There are more kinds of silence than there are words. You sit with it until dawn, then fold it again and place it inside your sleeve. Close to the pulse, the younger scribes begin to whisper about you. They don't say heretic. They say old. They say lost. They say still uses candlelight. They mean harmless. They mean unnecessary. One asks if he can take your place when you're gone. You nod. Not because you agree, but because you're tired, and because they will take it anyway. Some days you forget the lines, the rhythm, the order of the Psalms. You catch yourself rewriting the same verse twice, or skipping pages. You wonder if this is how memory ends, not in loss, but in repetition that wears the shape away. And so, you write again, even slower now, even if your hands tremble, even if no one will read it, because someone must be the last. And if no one remembers why the ink mattered, then let your fingers at least remember how it moved. One morning, you wake with ink on your hands. You don't remember writing. There's no page nearby, but your thumb is smudged, your sleeve stained, your fingernails rimmed in black. You wash them. The stain fades, but not fully. And when you press your hand to the page later that day, the words come more easily. Not because you remember, because your skin does. You begin to speak the words aloud again, not in the chapel, not before the young ones, but in your cell, to the walls, to the desk, to the cracked windowsill. Blessed are the quiet scribes, for they copy in the dark. Blessed are the pages without authors, for their truth is too wide for names. Blessed is the one who cannot forget, even when they wish to. The last time you visit the garden, it's early spring. The frost has lifted. The olive tree is still standing, older, maybe dying, but upright. You touch the bark. Something moves inside it. A beetle, maybe, or a memory. It doesn't matter. You kneel, place your hand on the ground, and whisper, "I left what I could. Please hold the rest." You rise slowly. Your knees ache. The sun cuts through the mist, and for just a moment, the dirt glows. And you smile. Your writing slows. Pages take longer. Ink dries faster than your thoughts. But still you write. You no longer hide what you copy. There's no need. No one looks. No one asks. They assume you are too old to be dangerous, too quiet to be a rebel. But they are wrong, because the fire lives quietly, and memory is its oldest wick. One morning, a novice enters your cell. He brings tea, leaves it at your side, turns to go, then pauses. "Is it true," he says, "that people once copied, in secret? That there were pages no one was allowed to write?" You look at him. He is young, unscarred, curious in a way that feels dangerous. And you nod. Yes, you say, and some still do. He doesn't ask who. He doesn't ask where. He simply says, "Will you teach me?" And you smile, because the answer is already written between the smudges on your palms, between the jars beneath the roots, between the folds of songs no longer sung. You hand him a quill and say, "The first line you copy must be your own, the second someone else's, and the third must be forgotten." They still copy, but the meaning has changed. The young scribes sit straight at their desks, dip quills into fresh ink, and transcribe pages that have been rewritten too many times. The Latin is correct. The strokes are precise. The rhythm is perfect. But something is missing. You can feel it, like a bell that's still ringing, but no longer echoes. They recite verses that sound familiar, but the edges are different. Softer, safer, polished smooth like river stones. One calls the Black Psalm a superstition. Another says the garden was a metaphor. A third claims the inquisitors were protectors of purity. They wear the robes. They keep the rituals. But their eyes no longer search. You want to argue, to correct, to stand, but you remember the final lesson. Sometimes the last truth must not be shouted, it must be planted. And so when they come, when the fire returns, you are not afraid. It is smaller this time, just a hearth fire in the scriptorium, but the smoke smells the same. A page is found, yours, folded, cracked, whispered to the wrong novice. The abbot, the new one, demands a search. Drawers opened, desks turned, cloaks lifted, whispers silenced. They find nothing, because what matters isn't on the shelves anymore, and hasn't been for years. They burn the page, just one, a fragment of the Black Psalm, a line you wrote by candlelight, smudged, faint. It curls into ash, and you do not flinch, because that verse lives in 12 mouths already, and one sparrow's cry, and a root beneath the chapel. The novices return to work. They write faster now, as if to cover the silence the fire left behind. And yet, that silence deepens. It has weight, not absence, but presence, the kind that hums beneath a floorboard, or in the folds of a tunic, or under your fingernails. You walk the grounds one final time. The olive tree still leans toward the sun. The soil still quiet. You kneel. You don't dig. Instead, you leave something behind. Your inkwell, half full, capped, resting against the roots. No message, no map, just a container, waiting. You press your palm into the dirt beside it, not to say goodbye, but to mark that you were here, that someone still remembered, that the ink didn't end. It simply went underground. Years pass, decades, maybe. The abbey loses its name. The bell cracks. The scriptorium becomes storage. The chapel wall collapses in a storm no one writes about. But beneath the stone, a garden still lives. And then, a child. No robes. No rule. Just a curious hand and an instinct to pry loose an old root. She finds a jar, wrapped in linen, dry, unbroken. Inside, a page. Not long, not clear. Just one line, etched in fading black. If you found this, you already know. She reads it once, then again, then presses it to her chest, and begins to hum.